Okay, Common Gaming here. I'm gonna do History of Autism Part 3. Autism in the 1950s. It was slightly better than the 1940s, 1950s. Slightly better, but not great. Or it was in between. It wasn't good. Like places like Canada would do lobotomies on people who had autism, not knowing that was making it worse. And the US was too, and other parts of the world. By the 50s, Germany outlawed lobotomies because they wanted to put that in the past. In the 60s, we still were institutionalized. In the 60s, they tried doing workplaces, but it was basically slave labor. It was basically like that, where some programs wouldn't pay them, or they only pay you a cent an hour, and a cent an hour in the 60s, you couldn't live on that. They'll just pay you 1 cent, and only 25 cents a week, which you couldn't afford much of that. They'll only pay you 25 cents a week, which was basically just, wasn't great. It was, yeah. And some places wouldn't even pay you at all. They just would have you make buttons, and then you wouldn't get paid. And then in 1968, they fully outlawed lobotomies. And no one could get lobotomized anymore. And then in the 70s, there still were schools where people would be forced, and there was segregation of people. There were kids who had autism. There still was institutions and all that. Then there was some Fair Wages Act trying to go through. That took forever. And in the 1970s, there still were schools where people would go to for autism, but the conditions were very bad. They would whip you and all that. In the 70s, they would call people with autism idiots, which was not right. And that was not right, and they would call you the R word. I'm not going to say that full, no. But by 1979 was the Inclusive Education Act for Canada. All provinces had to comply that people with disabilities, intellectual disabilities, autism had to be put into regular schools. But they still were segregated into a different classroom. But it was a step in the right direction where we could go to normal schools and not be forced into a school taken away from their families. That's it for this part of the history of autism. Next week, I will go into the bright future of where the days are getting brighter for autism. I'll cover the 1980s and the 1990s next week. And I love having autism. I hope I will do more history of autism. And yeah, the 20th century, for the most part, for autistic people were not great. But towards the ending of it, it was better, and I'll be talking about the early years of the 21st century in the future. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'm going to continue educating on autism. I'm just doing the history of autism because it's Autism Month.